A millionaire regains consciousness in the middle of his own funeral. Hearing his wife speaking with her lover, he decides not to move. Alejandro, a businessman accustomed to success, feels as if he is waking up from a deep slumber. With his eyes closed, he perceives a sharp pain in his body and extreme fatigue. When he finally opens his eyes, he realizes he is not in his house but trapped in a coffin during his own wake. Unable to move or speak, an indescribable terror overwhelms him, and questions arise in his mind. Where am I? Who put me here? Is this really a coffin? My God. Suddenly, he recognizes his wife's voice talking to someone outside the coffin. I thought we would never get rid of him, says Isabel, satisfied with having carried out her plan to dispose of her husband and keep his fortune. She then adds, now we just have to go ahead with the plan and then enjoy life. Yes, my love, you are really persistent, responds her lover Javier. You tried to kill him several times. I have to admit I thought he would die in the car accident you arranged. Do you think anyone will suspect? He asks, ready to continue with the plan. Meanwhile, Alejandro, fighting against his paralyzed body and with tears on his face, thinks, how could she do this to me? I gave so many chances to our marriage and this is what I get. I thought we were just going through a rough patch. I suspected her infidelity on several occasions, but only Manuel, my friend, knew the truth about our marriage. I need to warn Manuel. I have to get out of this situation. Isabel, far from appearing as a grieving widow, pretends to be devastated, while Javier, pretending to be a good friend of the couple, embraces her to comfort her. Alejandro, listening to the voices coming and going, starts to recall small incidents that happened in recent months. A misplaced ladder, a car that almost ran him over at night, a failed robbery attempt. What he thought was simple bad luck, he now understands were deliberate attempts by his wife to end his life. Alejandro begins to reevaluate his relationship with Isabel just as he hears her voice again. Scoundrel. If only he knew why I married him. It was pure revenge. His father hurt me, and when I found out he was his son, I only thought of revenge, says Isabel angrily. Did you know Alejandro's father? Asks Javier, surprised. But I thought you wanted him dead just for the money and to be with me, he adds. Isabel, impatient, replies, it was for both reasons. We'll stay a bit longer, then everyone will leave, and we can take the body to his hometown. That way, people will feel sympathy since his mother is buried there. Isabel, although she appears calm on the outside, harbors deep anger and hatred. So focused is she on her resentment that she does not allow herself to feel the death of someone who treated her well even before marriage. Meanwhile, Alejandro suffers, trying to breathe in that confined space, desperately searching for a way to escape. He manages to move the pinky finger of his right hand and the thumb of his foot, sparking a small glimmer of hope in the darkness. I will find a way out, Lord, help me, he thinks, determined not to give up. After the funeral, Isabel, accompanied by Javier, follows the hearse carrying Alejandro to his hometown. Before leaving, she creates a scene in front of Manuel, Alejandro's friend and right-hand man at the company, saying, Manuel, I know you would agree with me, so I'll take Alejandro next to his mother. It's the best I can do. Of course, Isabel, I won't be able to go. I have to take care of the company. I'll contact you later, Manuel replies suspiciously. Sure, right now I'm not in the mood to think about the company, but when I overcome my grief, I'll reach out to you, says Isabel, trying to hide her immediate interest in the money that will soon be hers. Manuel walks away, deep in thought, while Isabel and Javier continue their journey to the town where Alejandro grew up. Not interested in witnessing Alejandro's burial, Isabel leaves everything in the hands of her accomplices and departs, only wanting to ensure the job is done later. The accomplices ask Hector, the gravedigger, and his helpers to finish the burial, claiming that the young man had no family. They hand money to Hector and leave. Hector looks at the coffin with pity for the one lying inside. Meanwhile, Alejandro starts to move the toes of his other foot, and realizing he can move them more, begins to move his entire foot, struggling to regain control of his body. The gravedigger's helpers prepare the grave to lower the coffin. The day is gray, and the clouds, tinged with a somber hue, intensify Alejandro's melancholy. Hector, a deeply religious man, prays for that abandoned soul. When he finishes, he sees his niece Elena approaching in the distance. Tito, the dog that always accompanies Hector, starts barking joyfully upon seeing her. Elena comes closer and says, Uncle, I decided to visit you. You're never home. Ah, dear, if people stop leaving this world, maybe I could rest a little more, jokes Hector, eliciting laughter from both of them. Don't say that, Uncle. responds Elena, trying to hold back her laughter as they continue talking. It seemed to be a quiet day. There weren't many people around, so she decided to go inside. "But what is that?" she asked with curiosity and a hint of discomfort, pointing to a solitary coffin. "Why is there no one here?" inquired Elena, while her uncle responded immediately. "Look, niece, something unusual happened today. A woman with hair as red as fire and a man whom I assume was her partner arrived briefly accompanied by men dressed in black. With a quick and silent gesture, they paid me for the service and left like shadows, mentioning that the deceased had no family." Elena listened attentively, her heart heavy. "How sad, uncle," she commented, her eyes filled with compassion. At that moment, Tito, sensing the sadness in the air, began to bark as if wanting to offer comfort. Distracted by the emotion, Elena noticed a peculiar sound coming from the coffin. Curious, although a bit fearful, she approached to investigate, while Tito's barking intensified. "Uncle, did you hear that? There's something moving in there," cried Elena, alarmed. Hector, incredulous, approached to try to listen better. "Listen for yourself, uncle," insisted Elena, concentrating intensely on the noises coming from the coffin. Alejandro, the man everyone believed to be dead, felt that his presence had been noticed and pounded harder, pleading for help with a weak but firm voice. Without wasting time, Hector and his companions began to open the coffin urgently. To everyone's astonishment, they found Alejandro alive, moving slowly, his eyes wide with fear. Elena quickly approached, observing the man who was pleading for help with eyes full of terror. While the others tried to grasp what had happened, Elena, with a calm voice, spoke to the desperate man. "Stay calm, we're going to help you. Please breathe," she said, feeling deep compassion for the stranger. Alejandro tried to speak, although his voice was weak. Nevertheless, he persisted, wishing with all his strength to keep his secret hidden. Elena leaned her ear close to his mouth and listened with difficulty to what he had to say. "Please, don't tell anyone. If you do, she'll find out. She tried to bury me alive. I'll deal with the law later. Bury my coffin as if I were in it," he pleaded, his breath ragged. Elena looked at her uncle, seeking his approval. Hector, understanding the gravity of the situation, felt compelled to help and asked the onlookers for discretion, telling them he would handle the rest. They buried the empty coffin, and after they finished, Elena took Alejandro to the village hospital. As soon as they arrived, Elena quickly came up with an idea and said he was a cousin who had come to visit and had fallen ill. Alejandro, emaciated and pale, needed urgent care. Elena, knowing the medical team, explained that her cousin had arrived without documents and that they could trust her. Alejandro was treated. He was dehydrated and needed to stay on IV fluids under observation overnight. Elena decided to spend the night in the hospital with him. During his sleep, Alejandro cried and begged for help. Elena, feeling empathy, spoke to him with tears in her eyes. "You must be scared, but everything will be all right. Fight against this darkness. I'll help you, and so will my uncle. We are good people, and we will keep your secret and, who knows, maybe help you in whatever you need." After a bath and a change of clothes, Elena noticed Alejandro's youth. He had thick eyebrows, short black hair, and fair skin that contrasted with his serious expression. Alejandro was an attractive man, about 6 feet tall. "Why did they do this to you, young man? What is your name? I hope that one day you can overcome all of this," she said, as if Alejandro could hear her in his restless sleep. The night passed, and the first rays of sunlight entered the room, bringing peace and silence. Alejandro slowly opened his eyes, still half closed, and murmured, "Am I dead, or am I really in a hospital?" Upon fully opening them, he saw Elena sleeping beside him, and that sight calmed him, confirming he was safe. He thanked God for answering his desperate call and, with a deep sigh, let tears stream down his face. He knew he needed to contact Manuel. Noticing Alejandro was waking up, Elena approached with concern. "How are you? How do you feel? Can you move?" she asked. Alejandro, grateful, responded, "I feel fine, and yes, I can move." With a look full of gratitude, he added, "Thank you for saving my life. I don't know how to thank you. My name is Alejandro, by the way." Elena smiled, relieved. "I'm Elena. They probably gave you a neuromuscular blocker or some poison to paralyze you, but the important thing is that you're all right now." Intrigued, Alejandro asked, "You seem to know a lot about this. Are you a doctor?" Elena shook her head with a smile. "No, but I've always been interested in studying medicine. I wanted to study it, but I gave it up," she confessed. Then, with a plea in his voice, Alejandro asked, "Could you make a call to a trusted friend and ask him to come here?" Elena, wanting to help, asked, "Do you know his number by heart?" Alejandro nodded and said, "Yes, I used to call him a lot. Give me your phone, I'll dial, but you talk, I'm still feeling tired." Elena quickly dialed Manuel's number and with urgency in her voice said, "Manuel, I need you to come right now. It's about your friend Alejandro, he's alive." On the other end, the response was quick and decisive. "I'm on my way." Alejandro, hearing this, felt a wave of relief and gratitude, knowing he could trust Manuel's loyalty. Elena, with a worried expression, asked, "And now, what will you do?" Alejandro, with a faint but determined voice, replied, "For now, just rest until I can think more clearly. I'm really exhausted." Elena, uneasy, offered to do more. "Do you want me to call someone to stay with you?" Alejandro shook his head gently. "No, I think I just need to rest, and Manuel will be here soon." Elena nodded, saying, "Then I'll go home quickly and come right back. Are you sure you'll be okay alone?" Alejandro, with a weak but grateful smile, assured, "Yes, I'll be fine. Thank you so much for everything, Elena." Alejandro was lying in the hospital bed, eyes closed, breathing deeply. In the blink of an eye, his mind took him back less than 24 hours to when he was inside a coffin, feeling his life had come to an end. "How could Isabel do this to me?" he thought, hurt that he hadn't seen her true intentions. He wondered if everything she had said about having suffered abuse was even true, and how doubt was eating away at him. Isabel had entered his life almost like magic, and they quickly talked about marriage. Now in hindsight, everything seemed to have happened way too fast. "How could I fall for it so easily?" he berated himself. Isabel had approached Alejandro with a hidden agenda, fully aware of what she was doing, though not foreseeing the consequences. When he met her, she was a photographic model working on campaigns for Alejandro's company. Isabel, a tall, slender, red-headed woman, never went unnoticed. Her provocative style of dressing caught everyone's attention. From the start, she already knew everything about Alejandro's life, and she often visited the building where he worked under the guise of business commitments, though her intentions were different. Remembering this, Alejandro reproached himself for his naivety. How naive I was. Isabel used to manipulate Alejandro's feelings, making him feel sorry for her and showing an apparent need for affection. As they got closer, she confessed to being in love and shared a secret to gain his trust. "I can't believe I've fallen in love with you," she said, trying to involve Alejandro in her emotions. "You're human and humans fall in love," he replied. Though he thought she was rushing her feelings. "If you knew my past, you'd understand why it's so hard for me to believe that I'm in love with you," she hinted, shrouded in mystery. When Isabel discovered that Alejandro was the son of the man she hated most in the world, she decided to approach him with a clear objective. This happened when she visited Alejandro's company with her agent and had a brief meeting with Manuel, Alejandro's right-hand man since he was absent that day. While Manuel spoke with her agent about the job, Isabel scanned the office, looking at the objects, until she stopped in front of a photo whose silhouette she would never forget. It was the man she despised the most. A surge of anger overcame her, and unintentionally she knocked the photo over. "Oh, excuse me," she said, trying to hide her true emotion. Manuel picked up the photo from the floor while Isabel continued to stare at it. The picture showed Alejandro with his family, his father, his mother, and his brother. "Is one of them the owner of this company?" Isabel asked, feigning innocent curiosity. "Ah, yes. The one with honey-colored eyes is Alejandro, and next to him are his father Raul, his mother, and his brother," Manuel explained, pointing to each person in the picture. Upon hearing the patriarch's name, Raul, Isabel felt an internal shudder. "Incredible. So young and already running a business of this size," she commented, making a great effort to hide the hatred she felt toward Raul, Alejandro's father. Manuel laughed as many women spoke of Alejandro with admiration, not perceiving Isabel's true interest. The photo shoots continued, and with them Isabel's idea of revenge began to take shape. "I will seduce Alejandro, marry him, and make him pay in his father's name," she thought. Her eyes were lost in dark thoughts. When Alejandro finally arrived at the office and greeted everyone, Isabel observed him closely, noticing that he bore no resemblance to his father, but rather to his mother. She smiled at him amicably and greeted him as well. Manuel gave a brief overview of the meeting, and shortly after mentioned that he and Alejandro would have another meeting soon. As they said their goodbyes, Isabel began to feel a strong desire for revenge in her mind. After several casual encounters in the building and eventually managing to go out with him a few times, Isabel started sharing her life with calculated sadness, aiming to awaken Alejandro's compassion by telling him about the difficulties she had faced and how she now finally felt fulfilled. In one of those meetings, Isabel decided to open her heart completely, giving in to the temptation to get even closer to Alejandro. "I want you to know something important," she said, capturing Alejandro's attention with an intense gaze. "I feel the need to share this with someone." Alejandro, showing concern, replied, "Are you sure? We're just getting to know each other," but then added with a smile to ease the tension, "You can trust me. Your secret is safe." "It's about something I said before about not thinking I'm in love with you," she revealed, hoping to capture his full attention. At that moment, she told him that a decade ago she had become involved with an older man. Their meetings were secret, always out of sight of others. However, she later discovered that he was married and decided to end the relationship. The man didn't accept the end and started stalking her. She tried to ask him to stop, but 2 months later, on a dark street she used to walk home, he appeared and brutally attacked her. After the assault, he threatened her, saying she would never find happiness and that he would kill her if he saw her with another man. That night marked the beginning of a deep resentment in Isabel towards all men. She isolated herself in her home for months, refusing to go out. After the death of her mother, whose frail heart couldn't bear her daughter's sadness, Isabel found refuge with an aunt. In time, she resumed her life working as a model, but always avoiding any close contact with older men, seeking to work only for companies with unquestionable reputations. "This is a part of my life. I'm telling you for a simple reason. I haven't gotten close to any man until I met you," she confessed, as if revealing something unprecedented. Alejandro felt the truth in Isabel's words and decided to give the relationship a chance. In his mind, the fact that she shared her feelings and sought a deeper connection was already a sign of mutual trust. Over the months, the relationship between Alejandro and Isabel solidified. Alejandro observed closely and noticed that Isabel genuinely struggled to interact with older men, feeling anxious in professional situations that required such interactions. To help her, Alejandro always made himself available, even suggesting that she seek psychological support. However, Isabel hesitated, fearing that such an initiative could invade her privacy. With time, Isabel began to frequent Alejandro's house, showing trust in him, and soon they started talking about marriage. Isabel thought that her effort up to that point had been rewarded. Indeed, she wanted revenge, and the greatest of them would be seeing Alejandro suffer. She had become a cold person because of what had happened, and everything she had told Alejandro was true. Alejandro, committed, proposed to Isabel, as he had started falling in love with her. The first months were calm. Isabel continued working, now more involved in the company that her new husband owned. Months after the marriage, she began to change, mainly when Alejandro received the news that his father wanted to visit him. "But didn't you say your father lived in another country?" Isabel asked, visibly nervous. "He returned yesterday, and my mom is also eager to meet you," replied Alejandro with a smile, unaware of the growing tension in Isabel. Alejandro noticed that Isabel became visibly uncomfortable whenever the conversation turned to his father. Knowing that his father was an older man, Alejandro imagined that perhaps Isabel's discomfort had roots in the terrible experience of abuse she had suffered in the past. Wanting to ease the tension, he suggested, "I can tell them to stay in a hotel since our apartment is small." "It's fine, love. We'll see. It's still early for them to come," Isabel responded, quickly changing the subject. A few days later, his father suffered a terrible car accident and did not survive. Alejandro was devastated, while Isabel, satisfied deep inside and not knowing how to hide it, focused on continuing her act. She invented an urgent photo shoot on the day of Alejandro's father's wake and did not attend, leaving her husband to go alone to his hometown. "I won't take long," Alejandro said sadly. "Yes, love. Give my condolences to your mom," she replied, pretending to care. When Alejandro returned from his hometown and spent a few days mourning, he began to notice that Isabel was acting strangely. He realized she was having disturbing nightmares and woke up every night screaming, "He said he's going to kill me." Not knowing what it was about, Alejandro gave her medication to help her sleep better. After his father's death, Isabel became more distant, coming home late from work and not even kissing him. Alejandro tried to talk to her, hugged her, but Isabel remained cold, always repeating the same words. "It's just a phase. It will pass." Alejandro tried to be patient because he didn't know what else to do. Since Isabel didn't want to go to therapy, he decided to give her some time. During that period, many things happened. Isabel got involved with Javier, another photographic model, and let herself be carried away by passions that seemed like an attempt at self-destruction, as if she wanted to end the suffering caused by an older man who had marked her deeply. She lied to Alejandro, saying she had photo shoots in distant cities, but in reality, she stayed with Javier, to whom she told everything. She saw in him an opportunity to carry out dark plans, because Javier was willing to do anything for money. "Just tell me what I have to do," Javier said, excited by the thrill he felt with Isabel. Alejandro, feeling that Isabel was becoming more and more distant, called her repeatedly, and after a week she returned home, determined to make a decision that was stuck in her throat, to free herself from the nightmare that haunted her every night. She had decided to get rid of Alejandro. His father appeared to her in dreams, telling her to leave his son alone, that soon he would find peace. Yes, inside a coffin, Isabel thought with sinister intentions. Trying to keep up appearances, Isabel hugged Alejandro, hiding her true intentions. She suggested they order a pizza and choose a wine, simulating a return to normalcy. Alejandro, relieved and happy, believed that things were finally improving, but Isabel had other plans, far from the happy reunion Alejandro imagined. Dressed in seductive clothes, she sat on the sofa and said she would pour wine for both of them. Alejandro noticed something strange but couldn't identify her intentions. He just thought she was trying to be kind to him. She asked him to take a shower so he would smell good for her, and he agreed immediately. Meanwhile, Isabel poured something into Alejandro's wine, hoping the amount would be enough. When Alejandro came out of the shower and approached, she pointed to the wine she had poured for him, and before he drank, she gave him one last kiss. After he drank the wine, she asked him how work had been. "It was incredible, and there were only women," she replied, eager to convince him. Alejandro drank all the wine in the glass, and Isabel poured him more to keep up appearances. Shortly after, the doorbell rang and the pizza arrived. Alejandro went to get it, but upon returning he began to feel sleepy. He placed the pizza on the table and lay down on the sofa next to Isabel. She thought, "I hope you sleep forever, my love." "Let's eat the pizza, or the cheese will get hard," she said, pleased with the outcome. "I thought you missed being with me," said Alejandro, beginning to feel numbness throughout his body. "Let me lie here on your lap for a bit," he said, and fell asleep. After that moment, Alejandro never woke up again. Now in the hospital room, Alejandro began to look around again and realized that that moment with Isabel, sharing the wine, was his last day with her. After that, he had only heard her at his own funeral. It was a lot to take in all at once. Suddenly, Manuel entered the room, shocked and unable to believe what he was seeing. "My God, what have they done to you?" he said, crying, showing empathy for his friend and terrified at the idea that Alejandro could have been buried alive. "Everything is fine now," Alejandro replied, trying to calm him and ready to tell him everything. "How is the company?" "Well, to everyone, you are dead. I spoke with the lawyer and—" Manuel's voice broke, lost in the chaos of recent days. "I want you to take control of the company in my place. I trust you," Alejandro said with certainty. "Do you remember that power of attorney I gave you in case something happened to me?" Alejandro reminded him. "Yes, but— and Isabel?" Manuel asked, concerned. "She will get what she deserves. Take that power of attorney and assume my position. I'll help you from here." "How are you, young man?" asked Hector to Alejandro. "I'm fine, Hector. I haven't yet had the chance to thank you properly. I was so confused that I hesitated when I spoke," Alejandro replied with a trembling voice. "Don't worry about that," Hector replied. "Life is so precious and mysterious that words are not always enough to describe it or express what we feel. Everything is so abstract. Just enjoy this new opportunity and follow what your heart tells you, young man." Then he added, "Now, if you'll excuse me, this old man needs to go to the cemetery. Have a good day." "Goodbye, uncle, and don't forget what we agreed on," Elena reminded him as she kissed his forehead before he left. Hector stood up, followed by Tito, while Manuel observed Alejandro with curiosity, waiting for Elena to clarify what they had agreed upon with the uncle. Elena let out a slight laugh at their curiosity. "Before you ask, I'm going to satisfy your curiosity," she said, laughing, but her expression turned more serious as she recalled what had happened to Alejandro. "I asked him to thoroughly inspect all the coffins, and he has been doing it ever since," she remarked, reminiscing about what Alejandro had experienced. Alejandro lowered his gaze, feeling downcast, and thanked Elena for her support. To change the subject, Manuel asked what they were going to do. He mentioned that he knew some police officers, colleagues of his father, who had also been a police officer and was now deceased. If I share this story with them and talk about my friendship with Alejandro, I'm convinced they'll help us, Manuel said, imagining Isabel being arrested and prosecuted. Listen, guys, I think the old tactic of calling and saying we know everything will intimidate her, Elena responded. We could summon her somewhere and record her confession with cameras and recorders. You seem to have experience in this, Alejandro commented, smiling. Well, I know things about her that she confided in me, and I think that aside from me, only that man who was with her knows them because I heard her say it near the coffin, Alejandro said, and I think that will be an advantage. What will it be? Manuel asked while Elena listened intently. She confessed to me that about 10 years ago she was abused by a much older man. She told me because she was obsessed with me, Alejandro recalled, explaining how Isabel had a phobia of older men, especially those with gray hair and a similar appearance. She suffered frequent nightmares, particularly after her father's death, and even refused to attend his funeral. What if I call her and say I already know everything using that information? Alejandro suggested. But where could we meet with her? I can think of a place, Alejandro said, my boss's house. Hey, isn't your mom coming back from Europe? Manuel asked. No, she decided to stay there. My mom said she's tired of being alone at home, and since she barely spent time with my brother, she wants to spend some time with him, Alejandro replied. Uh-huh, and where is your mom's house? Elena asked. It's about 100 kilometers from here, more or less, Alejandro answered. They all chatted for a while, carefully planning. Then Manuel had to leave, promising to return to accompany Elena and the police friend to finally put an end to that unpleasant matter. Wasting no time, Elena started talking to Alejandro about how much free time he might have. Come on, Alejandro. I'm going to show you your room, Elena said softly. Thank you, Alejandro responded, not knowing what else to say. Elena showed him a simple room without much decoration. The bed was plain but well made. There was a wardrobe to the left and a desk near the window. She offered to arrange Alejandro's clothes in the wardrobe, but he thanked her, saying it wasn't necessary. Elena left him alone to rest and went to the kitchen. 2 days passed and Alejandro began to adapt to Elena's company. She always wore her hair up in a high bun and dressed in simple, light-colored clothes, always showing great attention and empathy. Alejandro was curious about what she did for a living, and as if she read his mind, she invited him to the kitchen, serving him coffee to talk. I am a psychologist, Alejandro. I took a few days off to be with you. I have a practice that I share with a friend from university. I rescheduled my patients for next week, she said, taking a sip of coffee and looking at him tenderly. Wow, that's wonderful. So you left medicine to dedicate yourself to psychology? He asked, intrigued. Yes, but I had my reasons for doing so, she said, smiling. And what are those reasons? Alejandro asked curiously. I'll tell you some other time, she replied firmly. Now I want to know how you really feel. After revealing that she was a psychologist, Elena kept her eyes on Alejandro as if he were her patient. Alejandro shared that, in the past 2 days, he had suffered from insomnia, waking up every hour to check where he was. He also mentioned feeling fatigued, having headaches and stomach aches. Alejandro, Elena said in a serious tone, in your situation it is common to start experiencing these physical sensations, especially because you might be suffering from post-traumatic stress, one of the most frequent reactions to severe trauma. You might be reliving something traumatic through flashbacks or even nightmares, she emphasized. That's exactly it, Alejandro said, lowering his head. I don't know what to say because everything is still very terrifying inside, he admitted sincerely. Elena approached Alejandro and hugged him, assuring him that everything would be okay, that he was not alone, and that she would support him for the sake of his mental and physical health. Elena stayed in the embrace for a while, sensing that he didn't want to let go either. She asked him to breathe with her at the pace she indicated, and to imagine the future, the faces of the people he loves and cherishes. She made him think of positive things to divert his attention from distressing thoughts. Alejandro, his eyes still filled with tears, thanked her for coming into his life, confessing that he had never felt so vulnerable. He hugged her again, finding comfort in her embrace and letting himself be carried by the hope she conveyed with her kind smile. Elena stood up and said, I have a gift for you. She returned with a small box and placed it in his hands. Alejandro, surprised by the gesture, opened the box with curiosity and found a journal and a pen. He looked at Elena with a questioning expression, and she quickly explained. It's a journal. I want you to use it to write down everything you feel, Whenever you want, calmly. It can be about your days, your dreams, your pains. It's a way to release what you're carrying inside. Alejandro laughed a bit, feeling uneasy about the idea. I never thought about writing a journal, he admitted. It's also a good therapy. While you're here, write if you feel comfortable sharing with me. I'm here to help you, Elena said, making herself available. Manuel called, informing them that he was coming to put the plan in motion. Elena mentioned that she had cameras and recorders available since some therapy sessions were recorded for study and research with the patient's consent. She also told Alejandro that Isabel probably had her own traumas and that she would try to speak amicably with her. Alejandro was surprised but decided to trust Elena, feeling that the therapist knew what she was doing. I'm nervous about all this, but Manuel said the police officer coming is trustworthy, so we'll go to my mom's house soon so I can show it to you. I want to end this once and for all, Alejandro said with anguish. Upon arriving at the old house where he had lived, Alejandro relived good memories. He asked Elena to help him open the windows to let fresh air in. He had found the key in the usual spot, under the flower pot. Elena smiled when she saw Alejandro's face, which showed a calmer demeanor. Are you sure you want Isabel to know where your house is? Elena asked. Yes, I do. I have nothing to do with that woman anymore, and she will be arrested, so she won't have time to come back here to harm me, Alejandro replied. Elena didn't ask anything else. She just remained silent while they observed where they could place the cameras and recorders. Soon, Manuel arrived with the police officer, and Alejandro explained everything in detail. They all sat on the living room sofa, and the officer considered the situation very serious, taking action accordingly. Manuel explained his plan, and his police friend accepted it immediately, as they would have enough evidence with the video and audio recordings. The officer said goodbye to Manuel, telling him he was at his disposal, and that when they set the right date, they just had to call. Manuel shared that Isabel had come to see him, asking how things would go from now on. And when she found out it would take a while, she caused a scene, saying that everything that belonged to Alejandro was now hers. Dissatisfied with the situation, she had hired a lawyer and soon discovered that Manuel held power of attorney. She seemed not to understand how he had come to possess that power in the first place. It's good that you signed while you were still alive, Manuel commented. She will get what she deserves, he added, showing a fury he had never experienced before. Calm down, Alejandro, intervened Elena. Well, I'm ready now. I can make the call whenever you want. Yes, call her right now. I want to see that imposter behind bars, replied Alejandro. Manuel stayed close to his friend to offer support while Elena dialed Isabel's number. The phone rang and she answered. Elena, taking a deep breath, began to speak. Hello, this is Elena. We need to meet to talk about how you buried your husband alive, said Elena calmly. There was silence on the other end of the line. Elena continued, explaining that she would send a message with the location and the agreed time for 5 p.m. the next day. She warned that if Isabel didn't show up, the police would be at her door the next day and it would be useless to try to escape. She pretended to want money, so Isabel would think that was the reason for Elena keeping the secret, and she asked that Javier also attend, implying that both their futures were in danger. Manuel informed his friend, a police officer, about the planned meeting with Isabel. The next day, close to the agreed time, Manuel provided the license plate number of Isabel's car to his friend, who discreetly followed her, watching her every move. He noticed that she stopped at a gas station and began arguing with Javier. I hate this kind of thing. Who is this idiot threatening me? Exclaimed Isabel. Keep your voice down, just fill the tank and let's go, replied Javier, trying to maintain his composure. Both got back in the car and headed to the meeting place. Upon arrival, Isabel saw no one and knocked on the door. Javier was right behind her. Elena opened the door and invited Isabel in. Alejandro and Manuel were in the living room, and the police officer, after seeing them enter through the front door, came in through the back of the house. Elena asked them to sit down. Are you Elena? Asked Isabel. Yes, I am. I won't say it's a pleasure to meet you, replied Elena, with an expressionless look, as if trying to penetrate Isabel's soul. What do you want from me, and how do you know me? Asked Isabel irritably. Elena explained that she just wanted to understand how Isabel was capable of poisoning her husband and burying him alive. Isabel, nervous, began to breathe heavily and looked at Javier. Where did you get that from? Asked Isabel, adopting a victim's tone. I know you well. You were pregnant when you went to that orphanage 10 years ago, and 9 months later, you left the baby there. Then 10 years later, you married Alejandro, seeking revenge because his father, Raul, had abused you. Come on, admit it, Elena challenged her, knowing more about Isabel than Alejandro had ever imagined. But how do you know that? You're crazy. Yes, his father abused me. That bastard is dead, and yes, I wanted revenge on Alejandro because of him. I hated him. I wanted him to suffer and die. I needed to tell him that secret so he would trust me, but I never told him who I really was, confessed Isabel furiously, pacing back and forth. In her rage, she revealed that her life was already destroyed and that she kept having nightmares about Alejandro's father, feeling disgusted by men who resembled him. The child that was born was the result of rape, and she couldn't keep the baby. She saw Alejandro as an opportunity to vent her hatred. She never truly loved him. Isabel began to cry, describing how she managed to get Alejandro to take the poison, thinking he would die in his sleep. She grabbed objects and threw them to the ground, screaming and crying in rage. Javier, seeing her in that state, didn't know what to do and was also scared. Why so much cruelty, Isabel? Do you feel satisfied after trying to kill Alejandro? Did that help you find peace within yourself? Asked Elena gently this time. Of course not, I feel filthy, replied Isabel through her tears. That idiot Alejandro had no will of his own. He accepted everything I said. I don't even know how much of what I told him he believed. She paused for a moment, reflecting. And how did you have the courage to poison Alejandro, who showed you affection? Asked Elena, encouraging her to continue speaking. Isabel's behavior was violent, alternating between deep rage and overwhelming sadness, showing constant mood swings. She admitted that she couldn't sleep well anymore because of what she had done, but she couldn't regret it, even though she felt an enormous emptiness. She didn't understand why she was confessing everything to Elena, who seemed to have a gift for speaking to people in crisis. Perhaps she was trained for this. Isabel was under intense emotional pressure and anguish, showing a lack of interest in everything. She just wanted to vent. I'm here to help you. I'm a psychologist, said Elena. Psychologist? Sure, you make me confess to a crime and then say you want to help me, Isabel replied with indignation in her voice, ready to leave. Wait, don't go now. I want you to meet someone, Elena requested, trying to convince Isabel to stay a bit longer. That's when Alejandro appeared, coming out of a room as if part of a carefully rehearsed play. Isabel froze. Her heart stopped. For a moment, seeing him appear, she stood still, her eyes wide open in shock. The silence was broken by the voice of a police officer who came out of the kitchen with an expression of absolute seriousness. Isabel, you are under arrest for confessing to attempted homicide, he declared firmly. Alejandro's presence alive in front of her was the last thing Isabel expected. She was so stunned that she couldn't even react. The officer continued, explaining that there was enough evidence to prove her attempt to kill Alejandro, and the fact that he was alive was the most evident proof of her guilt. You're going to pay for everything, said Alejandro, looking at her with an intensity that reflected all his pain. Then he turned to Javier, whose face showed silent fear upon realizing that he too could be accused as an accomplice. Before they took her away, Isabel looked at a photo of Raul and with a desperate scream exclaimed, "You ruined my life, you bastard! I hope you're burning in hell. I hate you all." Isabel cried in rage as the police escorted her out of the house. The blue and red lights of the patrol cars were already flashing outside. When Javier was taken outside, Manuel left the room and found Alejandro, whose face was pale and visibly affected. Without hesitation, he hugged him tightly, trying to offer some comfort. Alejandro felt a knot in his stomach, and a slight dizziness began to take over him. Elena, always attentive, helped him lie down on the sofa so he could rest a bit. Manuel looked at Elena, with worry clearly reflected on his face. "I'm concerned. He still doesn't seem ready to return to normal," he shared with a deep sigh. Elena, with an understanding look and a soft voice, replied, "I will take care of him, Manuel. You don't have to worry." Alejandro, who had been listening to the conversation, intervened when Manuel began questioning Elena's ability to help. "Didn't you hear when she said she's a psychologist?" Alejandro, though exhausted, spoke sincerely. Surprised, Manuel admitted that he hadn't been paying attention to what Elena had said before, as he was more worried about Isabel. "But that means you're in good hands," he added. Later, Manuel said goodbye, and Alejandro and Elena returned to Hector's house. Some months passed, during which Elena held therapy sessions with Alejandro, encouraging him to focus on the present and the future, and to find what truly brought him joy. Hector began to connect more with Alejandro, sharing cemetery stories and helping him face life's difficulties, speaking about the importance of living fully. "I'm leaving now, Uncle. I have a reading project today at the orphanage," said Elena, also saying goodbye to Alejandro. "Can I go with you?" asked Alejandro, eager to experience the place that Elena loved so much. "Of course, it will be a pleasure to have a helper. Are you sure you're ready?" asked Elena. "More than ever. I need to take back my life, but I want to start by accompanying you to the orphanage," Alejandro replied confidently. Elena took Alejandro to the orphanage and began explaining why the place was so special to her. She told him that her mother had been an orphan and was adopted at the age of 9 by Uncle Hector's mother. She was very happy in this home, and when she married my father, she wanted to work at the orphanage as a volunteer. The coordinators were delighted to have her back to help other children. In the morning, she was a teacher in elementary school, and in the afternoon she came to the orphanage to teach the children, Elena recalled tenderly. "But tell me, how did you recognize Isabel?" asked Alejandro, curious. "I was there the day I went to the cemetery to see my uncle. I was on my way to a store when I saw Isabel in the cemetery. I knew I recognized her from somewhere, but I kept going because I didn't want to disturb my uncle. However, on my way back, I stopped because there was no one else," explained Elena, revealing the facts. Elena continued her story, saying that Manuel had shown her a picture of Isabel before she came to Alejandro's mother's house. At that moment, she remembered Isabel from the orphanage. "I was outside the orphanage dropping off some bags to donate when I saw Isabel leave a baby at the entrance and then run away. I was the one who picked up the child and took him inside. When I tried to look for Isabel, she had already disappeared," confessed Elena. "Before entering your house, I had that memory," she added. "I'm sorry, but it was necessary. We needed her to bring out her ego and the painful memories." Alejandro remained silent, unsure how to respond. "But there is something you want to know, isn't there?" said Elena, as if reading his thoughts. "What could I want to know?" asked Alejandro, intrigued. "You want to meet Isabel's son," revealed Elena with a smile. Hearing this, Alejandro smiled, surprised by Elena's ability to understand his deepest desires. He began to realize how special Elena was, able to make him feel comfortable without expecting anything in return. That recognition made him see her in a new light, admiring the incredible woman she was. As they got out of the car, Elena introduced Alejandro as her assistant for the day. She had brought bags full of donations and asked him to help her. "Look who's here," said Elena, pointing to a little boy. "I came to help, Aunt Elena," the boy said cheerfully, with large green eyes and fiery-colored hair. Elena informed Alejandro that the boy, now over 10 years old, was Isabel's son. Excited, Alejandro began to talk to the boy. "Are you happy here, kid?" Alejandro asked him. "I am, Uncle, because Aunt Elena always comes here to play with us. She is like a mother to us," the boy responded. That day was impactful and eye-opening for Alejandro, seeing those children growing up without their parents' care but surrounded by so much love. Elena helped with activities and also provided psychological support to the children selflessly. Sometime later, Elena started a fundraising campaign for the orphanage, while Alejandro invested in educational projects for the orphaned children. "I can't believe it's been a year since my fake death," Alejandro commented with a smile of relief and happiness lighting up his face. "And how great that now you can sleep peacefully," responded Elena, sharing his joy with a mischievous smile. "And I would sleep even better if it were by your side," Alejandro joked, pulling a small box out of his pocket. "I'm going to take back control of my company and sell my apartment. I don't want to go back there anymore. I'd rather find a new place to live closer to here. It's only a 3-hour drive. I can buy something halfway," he said, laughing at his own situation. "What do you mean by that, Alejandro?" asked Elena with some distrust. "It means that I can no longer hide what I feel for you, because you are the best thing that has happened to me, and I want to know if I can be part of your life too. In fact, I don't want to leave your life ever," Alejandro declared sincerely. "I want a psychologist just for myself," he joked, laughing. "You're a sweetheart, but you have to stop being so naive," Elena replied, laughing. "What do you mean?" asked Alejandro, intrigued. "Yes," exclaimed Elena. "I saw the little box from the beginning. You're slow," both burst into laughter, and then Alejandro kissed her passionately. They shared many things in common, and now he wanted to join her in her volunteer work at the orphanage. This made him feel even more valued. Alejandro learned the importance of including others in his life and realized that, although everyone has their own problems, there are challenges much greater than one's own ego. He learned to set aside his pride every time he entered the orphanage. For him, that was the best therapy. Elena had become an angel in his life, providing him with a new perspective and joy. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and give it a like. These other stories might also move you. Enjoy the reading.